It is 2025 and all of these cars that you see on this road next to me are being driven. They're being driven by humans. But very soon, in fact, within the next couple of years, that might not always be the case. In fact, they did pass legislation that autonomous cars would be made legal from 2026. I believe what's happening is that trials will be taking place in 2026 with plans to see actual introduction of driverless, autonomous, whatever you want to call them. I don't like self-drive because self-drive relates to when you hire a car and it's like self-drive, you drive yourself anyway. So I don't like that term, but driverless, autonomous, cars that basically drive themselves. These will be implemented apparently from the second half of 2027 and they will be on our roads. So the question for you today, maybe a bit early for asking this, but not really actually. The years are flying past, aren't they? So the question for you today is, are we ready for them? Are we ready for driverless, autonomous cars? Are you ready to get into a car with no driver in it and allow it to drive us? Let's get into that right after this.
A brown car guy. Brown car guy.
So I've been thinking about this myself actually, and I have to say that previous experience for me has been quite difficult. I have been on a visit to Japan some years ago. This was on a closed circuit, so this was on a closed facility where a car took us around. I can't remember if it was a Honda Accord or a Honda Legend. I think it might have been an Accord. And it took us around, you know, driverless. It took us around, parked up and stuff like that. And it was fine, but to my mind it's like, well, you know, it's doing something that it's programmed to do in an environment that it's programmed to do it in. But then also a few years back I also tried the self-parking systems, which are now fairly commonplace in lots of cars now. Lots of modern cars have them, but this was quite early on when they were first being introduced. It was on a Mercedes Z-Class if I remember correctly. I was in Dubai and I thought, okay, let me try it. I just did it the once, and to be fair, it was perfect. It slotted into the parking slot, and in fact it was really weird because it behaved like a human. That's what really got me, because what it did, it was parked into a slot. So it turned and it parked into a slot, and then it decided that it didn't like how it was parked. It decided that it wasn't quite in the center, so it actually backed up, corrected, and parked itself again. I didn't do any of this. To any onlooker, it would have been as if I've made a mistake and I'm correcting it. It was the car. The car did it. The car did it. And then I also tried, you know, parking it against a curb where, you know, it came close to the car in front, and, you know, of course it was never going to hit it because it's, you know, but it freaked the hell out of me, I'll tell you that much. And I was like, nope, I've done it. I think I recorded it for a video. I've done it, done the exercise. Yep, proven that it works. I'm not doing that again. So to me that was like, yeah, that's it, I'm not doing that again. That's terrifying. But having said that, if I think about it myself, am I ready for driverless autonomous cars? From a professional side, let's put that aside for a moment. Just hold that for a minute. But from a personal point of view, in some ways, I've kind of been ready and waiting for it since 1982. What happened in 1982? Stay with me. I hope some of you, I hope many of you, but I'm sure some of you might well remember that hit TV show Knight Rider was introduced in 1982. And if you can remember the pilot or the first episode, when Michael Long, who became Michael Knight, gets reintroduced to what he thinks is his car, and they're like, no, this may look like your car, but this is not your car. And he goes out for a drive, and he's speeding along, he's approaching a truck, and in his head he's like, okay, I'm going too fast, there's a corner coming up, I'll slow down. Then the car overtakes the truck and he freaks out and he turns to Devon and he's like, what happened? What just happened? The car overtook the truck. And it's like, yeah, the car can, drive itself. And his first reaction, his first instant, if you play back the video and you watch it, his first reflex reaction is, I hate it. I hate it. I want to be able to make the decision, which basically encompasses and speaks for all of us really right now as we really face the real world prospect of cars that drive themselves. I think basically his exclamation there was something that is the way that we've all reacted. Further on, I think it's the next episode or maybe later in that episode, I can't remember. But of course then he goes out on his own in KIT, Night Industries 2000, and he goes, I want to play some music. And suddenly a voice comes on, what would you like to hear, Michael? And then he freaks the hell out. In fact, he stops. He actually stops, he parks up, he freaks out that much. He's like, what just happened? And then the car introduces itself, it says he's the voice of the microprocessors in the car. And again, Michael's first reaction is, like many of us would be, I guess, it's like, shut yourself off. I don't want my car talking to me. Shut yourself off. That's his first reaction. But then, of course, if you think about it, there was quite a few years of that hit show, many episodes. And of course, later on, not only did he learn to trust the car, but they became friends, partners. Essentially, it was a buddy cop thing, buddy cop movie type style of scenario where initially they don't like each other, doubt each other, grudgingly accept each other, come to respect each other, and then become buddies. And it was that sort of scenario, except this was a man in a car. Don't forget, the concept of the show was, the lone rider, but with a car. That was the idea. So he started to trust the car so much. I don't know if you remember, there was one episode where he gets pulled over by the police because they're like, you appear to be sleeping at the wheel. He was fast asleep. Then he went on, I think they stretched the scene a bit too far, because he went on with all kinds of bizarre explanations of why, he didn't hear them, he was sleeping, he had his head against the window. The fact was the KIT was driving at the time. But that's how much he trusted. He's like, so is that going to be us? Is that where we're heading? Well, one thing that proves is that if Michael Knight kind of represented us, and don't forget, this is an era, we're talking about the 70s, 80s, I say 70s, but remember this is 82. So we're coming off the back of the 70s, right? This was an era when men weren't necessarily, the heroes weren't necessarily tech savvy, they weren't of a digital era. The digital era really didn't really happen that much, to be honest, at that time. It was still the stuff of sci-fi, really. And the heroes were analog, to use their fists rather than use a keyboard, that sort of thing. So that's why for him this was such a shock. And I guess that he encapsulates the feelings that we all have now, particularly, I guess, my generation, where we're faced with all this technology and we have a choice. And the choice is whether to completely put our hands up in the air, turn on our heels and run away from it and go, nope, not doing that. Or to go, well, okay, what is this? Let's have a look, let's embrace it, let's see what we can do with it. And again, if you see the progression of Michael Knight's character, or David Hasselhoff, who played Michael Knight, like I said, he switches. He learns to adapt. He learns to get along with the technology. He becomes friends with the technology. And in fact, to become an invaluable partner. Hope you're enjoying this video. Make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe if you're not already doing so. And support independent automotive journalism channels like mine. You can do that at patreon.com, coffee.com, or taking out a subscription right here on YouTube. Or you know what, better still, you can go and buy my books. I've got 3 books out now. They're all on Amazon. They're all available to buy. More details on this are in the description, but buying any of these books will certainly help. Thanks so much for watching. So I guess that for a lot of people, whilst, and myself included, the idea of cars that don't have a drive, where you may not even sit in the drive, you may sit in the driver's seat, you may not touch the steering wheel or control, maybe the steering wheel even folds away from you, literally like folds out of the way, replaced with a desk, so that you can work or eat or whatever. Or maybe you're not even sitting in that seat, you moved across to another seat. The idea of that is appalling and horrifying on many levels. But on the other hand, then you come to adapt. You come to learn. You come to live with it. That's for my generation. At the end of the day, you know, I've used, as a media person, I've used all the tools that have been available to me. You know, I started out with a manual old school typewriter when I started out. Literally a clunk, 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 like that. Moved on to an electric, I remember a Casio electric typewriter is what I got. Then moved on to an Apple, you know, the box, Apple computers. Then PCs and laptops. Meanwhile, moved on to a word processor, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel. Got the Adobe suite, got Photoshop. Learned how to do Premiere, you know. Now CapCut, now it's all on my phone. You know, had a camera, had a film camera, the 35mm camera, had the 120mm camera, right? Then got the digital camera, then DSLR. Now I'm just carrying around this DJI Pocket. So, you know, you learn, you do. So at the end of the day, I feel like the reality is that as much as we're going to rant and rave against it, you know, the genie is out of the lamp. It's happening. It's here. We are going to adapt to it. Look, already we've seen the evidence of this, because in the countries where, for example, things like Waymo taxis, driverless taxis are already operating, people are already getting into those cars and using those cars. It is an easier ask for younger generation, for sure, because they've already grown up with this technology. Like I said, you know, when I started out my career, I had a manual clack, clack, clack typewriter. You know, move the paper across, replace the paper. Ink strip. But today's generation, they've grown up with technology. You know, ChatGPT isn't that much of a shock or a surprise to them, because they've kind of already been programmed to it. And I guess this is part of the slow introduction of AI that we've had. I say slow, and you're like, what do you mean by slow? It's happened really rapidly, hasn't it, in the last couple of years? Well, it has, but that's my point. This technology, ChatGPT, that we've got now has been in the development for years. But in the last couple of years, it's come to the fore, and it's really sort of, you know, become sort of an everyday term now, ChatGPT, or AI, or whatever. And the reality is that, you know, they've developed it, they eased it out to us, then they accelerated the moment that they realized that we would adapt to it and we would start using it. And we're kind of already being pre-programmed to accept concepts such as, you know, AI, artificial intelligence, things that do things themselves. And eventually, you know, it's not just cars, you know, like I said, you can buy fridges that tell you, you know, what you're running out of and what recipe you can make with the stuff that you've got in your fridge or your cupboard. So these things are already happening. Soon you'll be talking to your toaster. You'll be talking to your TV. Well, you can already talk to your TV, to smart TVs. So then it follows the reason that you will talk to your cars, and that you will tell your car, go park over there, fetch me at 2 o'clock. I need to go to the grocery, get some groceries, you know. That's inevitable. So going back to the professional side, it sucks. You know? To the professional side of things, as I mentioned earlier, it sucks because what we do as motoring journalists, as automotive content creators, has always been about driving the vehicles. Has been always about, you know, driving them, experiencing them, relating back to you, our audience, our readers, our viewers, what it is about that car that makes it good, unique, special, bad, in some extremely rare cases, if any. But that's been our job. But when you don't drive the thing, how are we going to review the cars, you know? You know, it's like, oh, here's a car. Here's a car for you to review. Okay. Where's the steering wheel? Oh, no, it's folded away. You don't need that. Oh, okay. What am I reviewing then? The plushness of the seats, the technology, the connectivity, whatever. I don't know. The silence, the comfort. Maybe. It'll change. We'll adapt. That's what happens, right? Or, well, we won't have a job any longer, which frankly is looking probably more likely, with AI taking over most media jobs anyway. So, love to hear your thoughts. I want to know about it. Autonomous cars. Autonomous cars are coming. They're here. They're coming in the UK. They will be on our roads certainly next year, and definitely widespread by the end of 2027 for sure. Whether there's taxis, whether they're Ubers, or whether there's people actually owning such cars. It's happening. Are you ready for it? Will you accept it? Will you let the car do the driving? Or let your fingers do the talking? Type into the comments what you really think. I look forward to hearing them and reading them. Make sure you hit like, share, and subscribe on your way out. And I'll catch you all in the next video. Shout out time, guys. Thank you so much. Hey, if you enjoy my content, why not get involved? By buy me a coffee. You can do that at either of these links. Or if you're watching on YouTube, buy me a thanks or take out a membership. It all helps. It really does.